Daniel Kinahan, the elusive leader of the Kinahan Cartel, never expected a shadow to creep inside his empire. But deep within his trusted inner circle, DEA agents like Michael Mike Carter and Samantha Sam Rodriguez were living a double life. For months they walked among criminals, earning trust, participating in illegal deals, and gathering the intelligence needed to dismantle the cartel from within. Now, with a network of lies surrounding them, the final strike was approaching. Could they bring down one of the most powerful drug empires in the world, or would their carefully crafted covers unravel before they could deliver justice? The Kinahan Cartel was not just any criminal organization, it was a force that seemed untouchable, a shadow empire built on fear and silence. Their influence stretched far beyond the streets they controlled, reaching into cities and countries with a network so tightly woven that most law enforcement agencies had only glimpses of it, never the full picture. For years, the cartel operated in secrecy, making billions through drug trafficking, money laundering, and violence. Their leaders were ghosts, always staying one step ahead of the law, protected by layers of loyal soldiers and sophisticated communication methods. The DEA knew that traditional tactics, raids, arrests, and surveillance could only do so much against such a well-organized network. The cartel adapted quickly, closing ranks whenever they sensed danger, disappearing before any real damage could be done. To bring down the Kinahan Cartel, the DEA needed a new approach, something bold and dangerous. They had to get inside, not just on the surface but deep into the heart of the organization where decisions were made and operations controlled. This meant sending agents undercover, agents who would live double lives, pretending to be criminals, gaining trust from the cartel's members. It was a mission that many thought was impossible. The risks were enormous. If an agent was exposed, they wouldn't just lose the operation, they would lose their life. Yet the DEA knew that if they wanted to disrupt the cartel's empire, infiltration was the only way. Behind closed doors, plans began to take shape. The agency selected a small team of agents with the skills, patience, and nerves needed for such a dangerous job. Each agent had to be trained to blend in perfectly, to understand the criminal world without losing their own identity. Months of preparation followed, crafting fake backgrounds, stories of past crimes, and connections to criminals that would make them believable. Every detail mattered, because one slip-up could unravel the entire operation. The agents had to live in constant fear of discovery. They had to be convincing in their lies while holding on to their true mission. The line between friend and enemy blurred quickly in this world. They couldn't trust anyone outside the small circle of DEA handlers. Even inside, there was worry about leaks or mistakes. As the agents prepared to step into this dangerous world, a tense silence settled over the DEA offices. The operation was risky, unprecedented, and could change the fight against organized crime forever, or end in disaster. The Kinahan Cartel was about to face an enemy from within, one who would fight shadows with shadows. The first step into this hidden war was about to begin. Creating the perfect cover was the most critical part of the entire operation. The agents couldn't just pretend to be criminals. They had to become criminals in the eyes of the cartel. This meant building new identities from scratch, lives that could withstand the scrutiny of the cartel's most suspicious and dangerous members. The DEA's undercover team spent months crafting these elaborate backstories, each designed to fit seamlessly into the cartel's world. Every detail was carefully considered. Agents needed fake criminal records, convincing tattoos, and believable connections to known gangs or drug dealers. They studied slang, habits, and behaviors common in the cartel's circles to speak and act naturally. The preparation included intense training on how to handle weapons, conduct illegal transactions, and even manage the social dynamics of cartel meetings. It wasn't just about looking the part, it was about thinking and moving like they belonged. The agents also learned how to use false documents, fake money trails, and covert communication methods. Their cover identities had histories filled with arrests, betrayals, and hardened street reputations, all fabricated but detailed enough to pass the cartel's toughest tests. The DEA used every resource to ensure that even background checks and digital footprints would support the false lives. Despite the rigorous preparation, no amount of training could fully prepare the agents for the reality of living a double life. Once embedded, they would constantly walk a razor's edge. If they acted too cautious, they risked arousing suspicion. If they pushed too far, they might get caught in illegal acts or violent situations. The pressure was immense. The agents had to remain calm under constant threat while feeding intelligence back to the DEA without blowing their covers. One of the biggest challenges was building relationships with cartel members. The cartel's world was ruled by loyalty and fear, where betrayal meant death. The agents had to navigate dangerous social waters, joining conversations about illegal deals and violent acts without revealing their true intentions. They had to earn respect and trust, which sometimes meant participating in morally gray activities, all while remembering they were undercover law enforcement. Every day brought new challenges. The agents had to constantly adapt to the cartel's changing tactics, sudden violence, and internal rivalries. They weren't just observers, they were part of a living, breathing criminal organization, forced to make split-second decisions that could mean the difference between life and death. The psychological toll was heavy, and many agents struggled with isolation and fear, cut off from their normal lives and loved ones. Despite all this, the agents knew their work was essential. Without convincing covers, the DEA's plan to dismantle the Kinahan Cartel from within would never succeed. The mission depended on their ability to become invisible shadows, criminals to the cartel, heroes to the law, walking a dangerous line that could break them at any moment. Earning the cartel's trust was a slow and dangerous process. The Kinahan Cartel was suspicious of outsiders and operated in a world where trust was earned only through actions, not words. The agents quickly realized that talking their way in would get them nowhere. Instead, they had to prove themselves through deeds, risky and sometimes violent deeds that tested their courage and loyalty. From the moment they made contact, the agents were put to the test. They had to participate in illegal transactions, help move shipments, and sometimes act as enforcers to show they could be relied upon. Each assignment was a calculated risk. Success meant deeper access, failure meant exposure or worse. They had to balance taking part in criminal acts with the knowledge that every move was being carefully recorded by their handlers back at the DEA. The cartel's inner circle was tight-knit, with members watching each other closely for signs of weakness or betrayal. The agents had to learn how to read subtle body language, hidden messages, and unspoken rules that governed interactions. Even a moment of hesitation or a misplaced word could raise suspicion. They observed how loyalty was displayed through silence, obedience, and readiness to act without question. As the agents completed task after task, they found themselves entangled in a world of lies and violence. The people they worked alongside were ruthless, but the agents had to convince them they were just as hardened and reliable. This often meant witnessing brutal acts or hearing about plans for violent retaliation. Despite the danger, they had to maintain their composure, knowing that any hint of doubt might lead to their downfall. Trust within the cartel was not given lightly. It was built on shared risk and shared secrets. The agents started to be invited to more sensitive meetings, where important decisions were made. This was a turning point. They were no longer outsiders but part of the inner workings, able to observe how the cartel coordinated their global operations. Yet, this new access came with increased danger. The closer they got to the cartel's core, the more they were exposed to the real brutality beneath the surface. Each day in the cartel's world blurred the lines between right and wrong. The agents wrestled with their own sense of morality as they performed tasks that went against everything they stood for. The deeper they went, the more they risked losing themselves in the roles they played. But pulling back was never an option. Too much was at stake. The mission depended on them becoming invisible, trusted shadows within a world built on fear and betrayal. As trust grew, so did the stakes. The agents knew that any misstep could trigger a violent reaction. The cartel was ruthless when it came to rooting out threats, and the agents were constantly reminded that their lives hung by a thread. It was a dangerous dance of loyalty and deception, one that pushed the limits of human endurance and courage. Once the agents gained the cartel's trust, they were granted access to a world few outsiders had ever seen. The true scale of the Kinahan Cartel's operations was staggering. They discovered a complex network of drug shipments, money laundering schemes, and secret communications that spanned multiple countries and continents. This wasn't just a street gang. It was a sophisticated criminal enterprise with layers of control designed to protect its leaders and keep the flow of illegal profits steady. Inside massive warehouses hidden in plain sight, the agents saw how tons of drugs were stored, packaged, and prepared for distribution. The cartel's logistics were precise and ruthless. Every shipment was carefully planned, using a variety of routes by sea, air, and land to avoid detection. The agents watched as cartel members coordinated with corrupt officials, fake companies, and even unsuspecting civilians to move their product. The complexity of these operations showed just how deeply the cartel had infiltrated legitimate systems. Financial operations were equally impressive and disturbing. The cartel laundered billions of dollars through shell companies, luxury real estate, and even legitimate businesses like nightclubs and restaurants. The agents uncovered hidden accounts and secret transactions designed to hide the source of the money. Tracking these funds required patience and expert analysis, but the agents realized that following the money was key to dismantling the cartel's empire. Communication was another vital piece of the cartel's power. The agents learned about encrypted phones, burner devices, and coded messages that kept the cartel's leaders connected while evading law enforcement. The cartel used technology in ways that made it almost impossible to track their conversations. Even face-to-face meetings were carefully planned to avoid surveillance, often held in remote or heavily guarded locations. Despite all this planning, the cartel's leaders were always one step ahead, adapting quickly to new threats. They ran the operation with ruthless efficiency, using intimidation and violence to maintain control. Those who stepped out of line disappeared or were eliminated. The agents saw firsthand the fear that kept members loyal and silent. This was a world where power was absolute and mercy was non-existent. The deeper the agents went, the more dangerous their mission became. They were no longer observers but active participants in a violent and secretive world. Yet, every detail they uncovered brought the DEA closer to understanding how the cartel operated and where to strike. The agents knew that the knowledge they gained could finally bring down the empire, but only if they survived long enough to use it. Danger lurked around every corner, but nothing prepared the agents for the moment when their carefully constructed operation nearly unraveled in a single heartbeat. During what was supposed to be a routine meeting with cartel members, an unexpected arrival threw everything into chaos. A rival gang, one the cartel had long been at war with, appeared suddenly, turning the gathering into a tense standoff. The rival gang's presence wasn't just a coincidence, it was a calculated move to expose and destabilize the cartel's network. For the undercover agents, it became a terrifying test of survival. In those moments, the line between life and death was razor thin. The agents had to act fast, blending in seamlessly while convincing both sides that they belonged. Any sign of hesitation, any slip in their carefully rehearsed roles could have revealed their true identities. They moved with precision, using every piece of training they had received to defuse the situation without drawing suspicion. The tension was unbearable, the air thick with the threat of violence. The rival gang's leader was aggressive and suspicious, demanding proof of loyalty from everyone present. The agents had to walk a dangerous tightrope, showing enough commitment to the cartel to avoid being seen as outsiders, while carefully avoiding actions that would deepen their involvement in the cartel's criminal activities. They couldn't afford to alienate the cartel or appear weak in front of the rival gang. Their survival depended on striking the right balance. When the standoff finally ended without bloodshed, it was a narrow escape. The cartel's leaders saw the agents as loyal and capable, but the close call left a lingering sense of danger. The agents knew they had survived by the slimmest of margins. The experience was a harsh reminder of the ever-present risks they faced, and the constant pressure to stay perfect in their roles. This close call also revealed another unsettling truth. The cartel's enemies were watching just as closely as law enforcement was. The criminal world was a dangerous chessboard, with rivals trying to exploit any weakness. The agents realized that being undercover meant not only gaining trust from the cartel, but also navigating a landscape filled with unpredictable threats from every direction. The near exposure was a turning point in the operation. It forced the agents and their handlers to reevaluate their approach, tighten security, and prepare for even greater dangers ahead. The mission was far from over, and the stakes had never been higher. Every step forward was now shadowed by the knowledge that a single mistake could bring everything crashing down, and with it the lives of those risking everything to bring the cartel to justice. The close call with the rival gang had sent a ripple of anxiety through the undercover operation. While the agents remained embedded within the criminal world was a dangerous chessboard, with rivals trying to exploit any weakness. The agents realized that being undercover meant not only gaining trust from the cartel, but also navigating a landscape filled with unpredictable threats from every direction. The near exposure was a turning point in the operation. It forced the agents and their handlers to reevaluate their approach, tighten security, and prepare for even greater dangers ahead. The mission was far from over, and the stakes had never been higher. Every step forward was now shadowed by the knowledge that a single mistake could bring everything crashing down, and with it the lives of those risking everything to bring the cartel to justice. The close call with the rival gang had sent a ripple of anxiety through the undercover operation. While the agents remained embedded within the cartel, the threat of exposure now loomed larger than ever. Inside the DEA, whispers of doubt began to surface. Some questioned the safety of the mission, others raised concerns about the increasing number of risks involved. To make matters worse, there were leaks in the system. Someone somewhere had started feeding information to the cartel. The agents didn't know who could be trusted anymore, and that uncertainty weighed heavily on them. It wasn't just external threats that posed danger anymore. The cartel's internal surveillance was intense. Members were quick to notice even the slightest change in behavior or attitude. The agents had to stay consistent in their actions, but maintaining that level of consistency meant walking a fine line between fitting in and going too far. To build trust, they had to risk more, get involved in more deals, witness more acts of violence, and show complete loyalty. But the more they immersed themselves, the more they questioned where the line between playing their part and becoming too involved truly lay. Then came the whispers of corruption within law enforcement itself. The DEA had long suspected that the Kinahan Cartel had moles inside the police force, but now it seemed like the operation was being compromised from the inside. Agents had been receiving cryptic information that someone was leaking intelligence to the cartel, someone close, someone with access. The knowledge that a traitor might be among them added a new layer of distrust to the already tense environment. It wasn't just a matter of betraying the mission, it was personal now. Every piece of information that slipped through the cracks, every detail that could be used to expose the operation put their lives at risk. The agents started to look at their own colleagues with suspicion, unsure of who they could trust within their own ranks. Who could be the leak? Was it someone in the higher-ups? Was one of the agents compromised? But the fear of being exposed wasn't just contained to the DEA's side of the operation. The cartel was just as paranoid, constantly searching for signs of betrayal. The agents learned that even the smallest mistake could cost them their cover. Their phones were monitored, their movements tracked, and every interaction scrutinized. The cartel's leaders were adept at recognizing patterns and behaviors that didn't belong, and any misstep could send the entire operation into disarray. The more the agents learned about the cartel's operations, the more the mission felt like a ticking time bomb. The stakes were higher than ever. As trust eroded within the agency and within the cartel, the agents found themselves in a perilous position. Their lives, their mission, and the future of the operation now rested on finding the mole and staying one step ahead of a system that was closing in from all sides. In the midst of the growing paranoia, when the stakes seemed higher than ever, an unexpected source of help emerged. It came not from the DEA, but from within the very heart of the Kinahan Cartel. One of the cartel's mid-level members, a man with years of loyalty to the organization, began feeding the agents vital information that could be the key to dismantling the empire. The agents had initially been wary. Trust, especially in a world built on deception, was a currency few could afford. But as more details came in, secret meetings, names of high-level operatives, hidden operations, the agents began to wonder if they had found an ally, or if they were being led into a trap. The man, who remained anonymous for his own safety, reached out to the agents in covert ways, encrypted messages, brief face-to-face encounters, and cryptic phone calls that were always fleeting and always left them guessing. Every piece of information he provided was more significant than the last. He revealed locations where weapons were being stored, connections to corrupt officials, and even insider details about the cartel's plans to expand their operations across new continents. The agents could feel the weight of his words. They were crucial, but they were also dangerous. The trust required to make use of this intelligence came with enormous risks. The agents couldn't afford to question their new ally too much. In a world where everyone was a potential enemy, overanalyzing motives could get them killed. But this source seemed to have a deep understanding of the cartel's operations. There were no small details in his information. Nothing was too insignificant. It felt almost as if he knew the inner workings of the organization better than the leaders themselves. His insights provided not only valuable intelligence, but also the opportunity to anticipate the cartel's next move. At first, the agents didn't know whether to believe the source's true motivations. Could he really be trusted? Was this a trap designed to flush them out? Or had he genuinely turned against the cartel? Doubt crept in, but the more the agents learned, the more they realized that the information he provided was accurate. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Still, the danger of relying on this unnamed ally weighed heavily on them. If the cartel discovered a betrayal, the consequences would be swift and deadly. The agents didn't know when or how the source would be exposed, but they had no choice but to move forward with the information he provided. Their next steps would be critical, and they knew that one wrong decision could bring the entire mission to an end. As they pieced together the intelligence, the agents started to make plans for the eventual takedown. The pieces were falling into place, but the clock was ticking. They couldn't afford to wait too long. The cartel was always adapting, always shifting, and their window of opportunity was shrinking. Every move they made from this point on would be more dangerous than the last. But with the help of this unexpected ally, the mission had taken a decisive turn. It was no longer just about survival. It was about bringing the Kinahan Cartel to its knees. The tension in the operation reached its breaking point when the DEA finally set its sights on a coordinated strike. After months of carefully collecting intelligence, building trust, and navigating a dangerous web of lies, the time had come to act. The agents inside the cartel had gathered enough critical information to take down several key locations, but it wasn't going to be easy. The cartel was more dangerous and unpredictable than ever. They had been on high alert ever since the rival gang standoff and had taken measures to tighten security at every level. This wasn't just about infiltrating a criminal organization anymore. It was about surviving a war that could explode at any moment. The agents knew that their cover could be blown at any time. The cartel was watching its own members closely, and any hint of weakness or betrayal would be met with swift and violent retribution. Every day felt like a countdown, with each passing moment increasing the risk of exposure. The closer the agents got to their targets, the more desperate the situation became. They were now dealing with highly sensitive information, and if any of it leaked out, even by accident, the entire operation would collapse. Just days before the raid was scheduled, the worst-case scenario unfolded. A tip from an unknown source, one that was later confirmed to be legitimate, suggested that someone inside the DEA had been compromised. One of the cartel's moles had infiltrated the agency, and the agents feared that their every move had been observed. The sense of betrayal was crushing. The possibility that someone they had trusted could be leaking information to the cartel added a layer of urgency to the operation. Every piece of intel now had to be re-verified, and the agents had to decide who within their own ranks could still be trusted. The operation, now at its most delicate phase, seemed to teeter on the edge of collapse. The DEA could not afford to delay the raid, but how could they act with full confidence if the cartel might already know their plans? Time was running out, and the agents had to make a choice: continue with the mission, risking exposure, or pull back and wait, potentially losing the chance to hit the cartel when it was most vulnerable. As the clock ticked down, the agents' nerves were stretched thin. They were closer than ever to taking down the heart of the operation, but with the risks multiplying, they began questioning whether it was worth it. Could they pull off the raid without tipping off the cartel? Could they be certain that the mole hadn't already undermined everything they had worked for? Despite their fears, the decision was made. The raid would go ahead. The agents knew that pulling back was not an option. The information they had collected over the past months was too valuable, and the chance to bring down the cartel was too rare. But the raid would not be without its risks. The closer they came to the cartel's inner circle, the greater the chance that everything, their mission, their lives, and the future of law enforcement's fight against the cartel could fall apart in a single moment. The final strike had begun, and with it came the knowledge that they were now in the most dangerous phase of their mission. The night of the raid was tense with anticipation, a culmination of years of planning and months of covert work. The DEA had synchronized their strike to target several key cartel locations simultaneously: warehouses, hidden stash houses, and offices with precision. The agents who had spent so long embedded within the cartel were now poised to see the empire they had infiltrated fall apart. Every agent knew the stakes. This was the moment that could make or break everything. They had to move quickly, decisively, and without hesitation, knowing that any mistake could send everything into chaos. As the operation unfolded, the agents inside the cartel were in the midst of their own preparations. They had spent weeks feeding the DEA information, all the while keeping up appearances with the cartel's leaders. They had earned their place within the organization, but now, in the final hours, every conversation, every meeting felt like a tightrope walk. They had been told the raid was imminent, but there was always the risk that the cartel might have uncovered the plan. The paranoia among the cartel's leaders had grown over the past few weeks. With increased security and more careful movements, the agents knew that, for the operation to succeed, they had to keep up their roles as loyal members while hoping that their intel had hit the mark. The first wave of the raid was a flurry of activity. DEA agents stormed the cartel's stash houses, catching the lower-level operatives off guard. The shock and confusion were immediate. The cartel had been too confident, too secure in their belief that their empire was untouchable, but they hadn't anticipated the precision and coordination of the DEA's strike. Law enforcement agents flooded in, arresting everyone they could find and seizing massive quantities of drugs and weapons in a matter of minutes. The agents who had been embedded within the cartel watched from the inside, knowing the raid was unfolding as planned. They had played their parts perfectly, feeding the right intelligence, but now they had to stay silent, blending in with the chaos. However, as the operation moved into the cartel's more secure locations, things started to spiral out of control. A mole within the DEA had somehow learned about the strike and tipped off the cartel's top leaders, causing them to flee just before the final wave of arrests. The operation wasn't as clean as the DEA had hoped. A few key players escaped, and some of the most high-profile cartel members slipped through the cracks. The agents who had worked so hard to infiltrate the cartel were forced to make a dangerous decision: continue the pursuit or cover their own tracks to avoid being compromised. They had been on the inside for months, learning the cartel's operations and gaining their trust, but now the threat of exposure was more real than ever. The chaos of the raid, combined with the knowledge that some cartel leaders had escaped, sent shockwaves through the team. They knew that, while they had made significant progress, they hadn't fully destroyed the empire. In the aftermath of the raid, the DEA had seized millions of dollars in assets, drugs, and weapons. Several key figures had been arrested or killed, and the operation had dealt a major blow to the Kinahan Cartel. But the escape of the top leaders meant that the cartel was far from finished. The operation had succeeded in many ways, but it also left a lingering sense of unfinished business. The agents knew that the road ahead would be just as dangerous, and that the fight against the cartel wasn't over. The mission had been a success, but the real war was only just beginning. In the days that followed the raid, the DEA's victory felt bittersweet. The operation had dismantled large portions of the Kinahan Cartel's infrastructure, seized an enormous amount of illicit goods, and arrested many mid-level operatives. But the top leadership, those who controlled the cartel's most profitable operations, had escaped, slipping through the cracks with almost surgical precision. It was clear that while the raid had dealt a major blow to the cartel, the fight was far from over. The agents who had infiltrated the cartel were still inside, trying to maintain their cover, and the weight of their success was quickly overshadowed by the realization that their mission was incomplete. The top cartel leaders were still out there, and with them the operations they had built up over the years. As much as the agents had gained the trust of the lower-level members and gathered invaluable intelligence, they knew that the real power of the cartel lay in the hands of the leaders who were now hiding in the shadows. While law enforcement regrouped and analyzed the intel gained from the raid, the agents knew that their work wasn't finished. The cartel was regrouping as well. Word on the streets spread like wildfire. The Kinahan Cartel was wounded but not broken. Their leaders were in hiding, but they were far from powerless. As the DEA worked to track down the fugitives, the agents inside the cartel were tasked with maintaining the fragile web of trust they had spent so long building. It was a delicate balance. One misstep could lead to their exposure, or worse, the cartel closing ranks and disappearing altogether. The criminal world was a dangerous chessboard, with rivals trying to exploit any weakness. The agents realized that being undercover meant not only gaining trust from the cartel, but also navigating a landscape filled with unpredictable threats from every direction. The near exposure was a turning point in the operation. It forced the agents and their handlers to reevaluate their approach, tighten security, and prepare for even greater dangers ahead. The mission was far from over, and the stakes had never been higher. Every step forward was now shadowed by the knowledge that a single mistake could bring everything crashing down, and with it the lives of those risking everything to bring the cartel to justice. The close call with the rival gang had sent a ripple of anxiety through the undercover operation. While the agents remained embedded within the cartel, the threat of exposure now loomed larger than ever. Inside the DEA, whispers of doubt began to surface. Some questioned the safety of the mission, others raised concerns about the increasing number of risks involved. To make matters worse, there were leaks in the system. Someone, somewhere, had started feeding information to the cartel. The agents didn't know who could be trusted anymore, and that uncertainty weighed heavily on them. It wasn't just external threats that posed danger anymore. The cartel's internal surveillance was intense. Members were quick to notice even the slightest change in behavior.